When you reference getting Canadian energy, for example, in what you just talked about, to other markets, do you mean conventional energy? And to be specific, does this government intend to demarcate itself from the government under Justin Trudeau in its approach to oil and gas, to be blunt?
Well, I think the Prime Minister, both in the election campaign and his comments since, and as we know, he grew up in Alberta, went to high school in Edmonton. He knows the province of Alberta very well. He had a constructive conversation with both Premier Smith and Premier Moe. So we intend to be supportive of the Alberta economy, and our government recognizes the importance of conventional energy in terms of the economic prosperity of the country. We can do both. We can support a transition to less carbon-intensive forms of energy, but recognize that the world continues to need conventional oil and gas, and Canada should be a reliable, dependable supplier of those energy resources as well. So I'm confident that we have absolutely found the right balance, and I'm confident, recognizing, as I say, the Prime Minister's desire to convene the First Ministers in Saskatoon and work with Premier Moe. I've spoken to Premier Moe since the First Minister's meeting. I'm very confident that we can support every part of the country's economy in a way that will bring greater prosperity to the whole country. That was what we offered Canadians in the election, and we're at work doing that now.
Do you concede, though, that the sentiment in Alberta and Saskatchewan is that that was not the case over the last 10 years, and that there is a high level of concern that that could continue under a Mark Carney government because you have not, for example, backed off of an emissions cap for the oil and gas sector, or C-69, which the Supreme Court even called your government out on? Why are you sticking to those policies which that part of the country has felt greatly inhibited their economic success?
So again, the Prime Minister, I think, Prime Minister Carney has taken a constructive and positive tone with respect to Western Canadian resources and their importance to the Canadian economy. He is in ongoing conversations with other First Ministers, including obviously the First Minister, the Premier of Alberta, the Premier of Saskatchewan, and others. Those conversations will happen over the next number of weeks. If he's convened them, as I said, in person in Saskatoon with Premier Moe, it's precisely to have those conversations and understand how the Government of Canada can be a partner. The fact that he's saying that we should collaborate in terms of the review approval process for large projects with provinces, one project, one review, not duplicating work that's done by provinces. This is a significant departure from the previous government, and the Prime Minister has, I think, shown a great deal of understanding and openness to support the economy of these resource-intensive provinces.
With all respect, though, Minister, how is it a great departure? I mean, once again, tone is not action. And I think that's the point that the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan have been making repeatedly over the last number of weeks. And the only actions that we've seen so far is that your government is standing by an emissions cap that the sector and those provinces say will be punitive in nature insofar as limiting the increases in production in that part of the country for oil and gas. And you're sticking by C-69, which they have essentially dubbed the No More Pipelines Act. Like, what actions specifically will you take to address the concerns of a very important part of this country?
So you'll forgive me, Vashi, but actions, as we speak this morning, the election was less than 2 weeks ago. The new government hasn't been formed in terms of a swearing in of a new cabinet. Parliament will come back in a few weeks. There'll be a speech from the throne delivered by His Majesty the King. So you'll understand, and the First Minister's meeting has already been scheduled to happen in Saskatoon, co-hosted with Premier Moe. So I understand the question. I understand the concern of people across the country with respect to those issues. But the government is at work. The Prime Minister is very much conscious of those concerns. And we will be working through them with those provinces. But to say that we've landed on a final set of measures or that previous government's policies will not change in any way, I think is an oversimplification. The first cabinet meeting after Mr. Carney became Prime Minister, he got rid of the retail carbon tax. Pretty important in parts of the country like New Brunswick, where I come from. I think he's shown a willingness to evolve policies, but we have to let the government be sworn in, and we have to let the Prime Minister talk to the premiers over the next couple of weeks.
That's a totally fair point, except for the two policies that I highlighted, the emissions cap and C-69, are things that your party and the Prime Minister said during the campaign he would abide by, which is exactly why I selected them, which is also why you heard from the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan, pardon me, on those very policies. They have identified them as clear irritants, and during the campaign, your party said you would stick by them.
And again, I'm not surprised that different premiers from different political parties find policies of a Liberal government different than perhaps they would like. The important thing is that we can have respectful, productive conversations with those governments, which is exactly what we're doing. We're going to work on a whole number of areas where there's broad agreement between our government and those premiers, and continue to be a constructive partner. Mr. Carney has shown enormous openness, we think, to Western Canadians, to the provincial governments and territorial governments they've elected. That's the work that we're going to continue to do, and the final answer is far from defined.